It's amazing that of the technology that existed during the time frame, that they could come up with this type of a vehicle.
In 1944, German engineers built an aircraft that does not show up on radar. It carries a payload calibrated to a single weapon, a radioactive bomb designed to make entire cities permanently uninhabitable. The named targets are London, New York, Washington, D.C. The blueprint sat classified in American storage for 64 years.
Generations ahead of its time, the coveted Nazi war prize remains under tight security, along with other U.S. artifacts.
Until a 2009 test finally proved what the wing was actually built to do. The flying wing. The story starts with two brothers and a question nobody else is asking. And Reimar Horten grow up flying gliders in 1920s Germany, in the brief window when unpowered flight is the only kind their country is legally permitted. They study every aircraft in the sky and see the same waste in all of them. A long fuselage down the middle, a tail sticking out the back, vertical fins clawing at the air. Every surface that is not a wing is generating drag. Every gram of drag burns fuel that should be carrying the aircraft farther. The brothers ask the question out loud. What if you got rid of everything except the wing? No fuselage, no tail, no fins? One curved surface generating lift across its entire span, with the pilot, the fuel, and the payload tucked inside the wing structure itself. The aerodynamic efficiency would be unlike anything flying. Less drag means less fuel burned, which means dramatically more range on the same engine output. Not by a small margin, by a factor that changes the entire strategic calculation of what an aircraft can reach. They build scale models from plywood and wood glue and test them on the same hills where they learned to fly. The crescent-shaped craft fly smoother and stay airborne longer than conventional gliders of the same weight. The lift-to-drag numbers they record beat anything in the published literature of the era. The math holds up in the air, launch after launch. The entire global aviation industry has been leaving performance on the table since the Wright brothers. And nobody noticed because nobody asked. The impossible demand. By 1943, Germany is losing the war fast. Allied bombers arrive over German cities in waves, burning factories and killing pilots faster than the Luftwaffe can replace them. Hermann Göring, commanding Germany's entire air force, is out of conventional options. So he announces a hard specification and dares anyone to meet it. He calls it the 3x1000 program. Build a combat aircraft that carries 1,000 kilograms of payload, flies 1,000 kilometers, and hits a speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. Every engineer in Germany tells him it is impossible. Contemporary fighters barely crack 700 kilometers per hour in a full power dive. Heavy bombers cruise at 400. Jet engines exist, but they drink fuel so aggressively that any jet fast enough to hit 1,000 kilometers per hour burns its tanks dry long before crossing 1,000 kilometers of ground. The numbers do not close. Messerschmitt says no. Junkers says no. The whole program looks like the fantasy of a man who has confused ambition with physics. Then the Horten brothers run their flying wing through the same equations. Their design has a fraction of the drag of any conventional aircraft. That single fact rewrites the fuel math. Less drag at speed means lower burn. Lower burn means the range target is suddenly achievable on a fuel load that would strand any conventional jet well short of the finish line. A jet-powered flying wing is the only design on the planet that hits all three of Göring's numbers at once. Not because it pushes harder against physics, but because it has less physics to push against. They draft the proposal, call it the Horten-Ho 229, and send it in. Göring does not laugh. He calls the brothers in and gives them everything they ask for. Materials, engineers, top priority across the entire German production chain. The funding has no ceiling, and the aircraft they are about to build will do something. Nobody officially authorized. The ghost plane, the Ho-2. 29 is not primarily fast, it is invisible. Reimar Horten has spent years studying British radar, and his conclusion is brutal. Any aircraft built of metal has already lost the radar war before it leaves the runway. The chain home network defending England transmits radio waves outward and reads the reflections that bounce back when those waves strike solid objects. Metal reflects radio waves almost perfectly. Every aluminum and steel aircraft in the sky lights up on a radar screen like a flare in a dark room. Reimar concludes the material of construction is the entire problem. Wood does not reflect radio waves the same way. They scatter, they weaken, or they pass through entirely. An aircraft built of laminated wood composite returns almost no radar echo, a vague smear on a screen, or nothing at all. Reimar goes further than the wood itself. The adhesive binding the layered plywood panels of the HO 229's wing skin is formulated with coal dust and charcoal particles. When Northrop Grumman scientists obtained surviving samples in 2009 and run them through electromagnetic testing, they find the carbon particles are absorbing incoming radar energy and converting it into trace heat, not reflecting it, not scattering it, consuming it. This is radar-absorbent material, deliberately engineered into the composite skin of an aircraft built 4 decades before the United States publicly admits the concept exists. When Allied engineers pull the HO 229 apart after capture, they assume Germany ran short on metal and used wood as a substitute. They are wrong. The 2009 replica test settles the question. Against radar systems equivalent to Britain's chain home network, the HO 229 produces a signature indistinguishable from a large bird or weather noise on the screen. A conventional bomber of the same era appears from 200 kilometers away, giving radar operators 90 minutes of warning. The HO 229 appears with 8 minutes left. 8 minutes is not enough time to scramble fighters. It is barely enough time to sound an alarm. The stealth is not the weapon. It is the delivery system. The weapon is what the payload bay was sized to carry. The hidden purpose. The payload specification of the HO 229 is 1,000 kilograms. That number does not come from Göring's program by accident. It matches the projected weight of a specific weapon Nazi Germany is quietly developing in parallel with the aircraft itself. Germany never builds a working nuclear bomb. The physics, infrastructure, and timeline all run against it. A dirty bomb runs on different rules. A dirty bomb wraps conventional high explosives around radioactive material harvested from reactor testing. It does not require fission. The blast itself is modest. The blast is not the point. What the blast disperses across the target zone is the actual weapon. Radioactive particles spread through soil, groundwater, and air at concentrations that render entire city districts uninhabitable for decades. The objective is not destruction. The objective is permanent denial. You make the ground itself lethal and force evacuation that never ends. Cities recover from bombs. They do not recover from contamination at that scale, not within any time frame that matters to a war. The strategic logic is colder than anything the Allies are planning. A conventional bombing raid on London kills civilians, burns blocks, and devastates a generation. London rebuilds. A dirty bomb raid on London empties the city and keeps it empty. The streets stand intact. The buildings stand intact. The parks stand intact. Nothing burns and nothing collapses. The radiation reading on a Geiger counter is the only thing that has changed, and that reading does not move for a human lifetime. The capital of the British Empire becomes a sealed perimeter that nobody enters. The same logic applies to every other target on the list. The HO 229 is built to carry exactly this. Fast enough that radar gives 8 minutes of warning, stealthy enough to register as background noise, carrying a payload calibrated to the weapon's documented weight. The recovered Friedrich Rothe documents are explicit on all 3 specifications. The weight, the bay dimensions, the material composition of the airframe, and the target assignments are filed together. The aircraft and the weapon are designed in coordination by the same program for the same mission, on the same timeline. The named targets in those files are London, Allied Army positions advancing through Belgium and France, New York, Washington, D.C. Read that list again. London is the heart of the British war effort. The Allied positions in Belgium and France are the forward edge of the Western Front, the army that is closing on Germany itself in the winter of 1944. Hitting those positions with a contamination weapon does not just kill the soldiers standing on that ground. It denies that ground to every Allied unit that comes after them. The advance stops at the edge of the contamination zone and stays stopped. New York and Washington, D.C. are something else entirely. They are not military targets. They are the civilian and political center of the country, supplying England with the equipment, fuel, and aircraft that are dismantling Germany from the air. Take Washington off the map and you decapitate the war from 6,000 kilometers away. The planners do not think in terms of one aircraft delivering one weapon. They think in formations. Multiple HO-229s arriving simultaneously across multiple cities, each one invisible. Each one carrying a payload designed not for a single strike, but for permanent removal of the target from the map. You do not need to win every engagement if you can take the ground out of the war. You do not even need to break enemy military formations. You only need to make their cities unlivable and their supply chains untouchable. The engineers do not stop at the HO-229, locked inside the same facility. SAFES is a design called the HO-18, not a stretch of the existing aircraft, a complete redesign for a different mission. 3 times the size of the HO-229, 6 jet engines. Fuel calculated for a fully transatlantic crossing. The aerodynamic analysis places a fully loaded radar-invisible aircraft within striking distance of the eastern seaboard of the United States. The geometry is finished. The range figures are worked out. The launch profile is mapped. The aircraft exists as a fully engineered design, waiting only on the factory infrastructure that Project Reese is supposed to provide. New York and Washington appear in the HO-18 target documents as named targets, not hypothetical scenarios. Stop and subscribe right now. What comes next is the slave labor mountain factory the Nazis carved into solid granite to build these aircraft by the hundreds, and the transatlantic bomber design that was already finished, already aimed at New York and Washington, and only weeks of factory completion away from production. Hit subscribe. This story gets worse from here. The Underground Empire. By late 1944, Allied bombing has made above-ground aircraft manufacturing functionally impossible in Germany. Factories are burning, supply chains are fractured, rail lines are cut faster than crews can repair them. The HO-229 cannot matter if there is no facility left standing to build it. Nazi high command commits to a solution on a scale that is genuinely difficult to picture. Move the entire program underground. In the Owl Mountains of what is now southwestern Poland, a construction project called Project Reese, meaning Project Giant, is already underway. 7 sprawling subterranean complexes commissioned by Hitler at the height of the war. Slave laborers drawn from the Gross Rosen concentration camp system are driven into the mountains and forced to excavate. Tens of thousands of workers are used. A devastating number die from exhaustion, deliberate starvation, cave-ins from rushed blasting schedules, and direct killing by the guards. The mountain tunnels are built on human bones. What those workers are forced to carve into the granite is not a shelter. It is a complete industrial manufacturing complex. The main corridors run for kilometers. They are 4 to 5 meters wide and tall enough to swallow heavy overhead cranes. Rail lines are laid underground, so raw materials arrive and finished aircraft components depart without ever appearing where Allied reconnaissance can photograph them. The deepest sections sit under more than 50 meters of rock. No Allied bomb in the 1944 inventory can reach production lines buried that deep. The B-17 Flying Fortress, the workhorse of the American bombing campaign, drops munitions that crater the surface and collapse buildings. None of them touch a factory floor under 50 meters of granite. Even the British Tallboy bomb, the heaviest weapon either Allied Air Force is putting on a target in 1944, cannot punch through the rock above the deepest tunnels. The plan is explicit. Move HO-229 production fully underground and build them by the hundreds. Aircraft roll out of the mountain in finished condition, get towed to dispersed launch fields under camouflage netting, and take off for missions the Allies have no warning of and no defense against. The Allies reach Friedrichsroda in March 1945 before the tunnel production lines are finished. The timetable that was supposed to give this weapon the war it was built for runs out by weeks, possibly less. The crash and the discovery. On February 18, 1945, test pilot Erwin Ziller takes the second HO-229 prototype to 800 meters above Oranienburg airfield. The aircraft is performing exactly as designed, smooth, responsive, almost eerily quiet, its jet engines buried inside the wing structure rather than hanging exposed off the leading edge. Then, the right engine dies. Carbon monoxide from the failing engine seeps into the cockpit before Ziller can execute emergency procedures, incapacitating him rather than handing him a problem he can fight through. The physics of what follows are unforgiving. A flying wing without a conventional tail has no mechanism to counteract asymmetric thrust the moment one engine drops out. The geometry that makes the HO-229 efficient in balanced flight becomes a death trap the moment the balance breaks. The unbalanced thrust forces the aircraft into a rotation the pilot cannot correct. It enters a flat spin from which there is no recovery. Ziller does not survive. The prototype burns on impact. 3 weeks later, on March 14, 1945, soldiers of the United States Army's 3rd Armored Division force opened the doors of a sealed hangar in Friedrichroda, Germany. Inside, on a wheeled trolley surrounded by abandoned tools and mid-task work orders left exactly as the workers dropped them when the evacuation order came, sits the 3rd HO-229 prototype. Days from completion, the final welds not yet closed, the cockpit instrumentation not yet calibrated. It never gets those days. American soldiers photograph everything, then begin the systematic dismantling. Every component, every blueprint, every document found at the facility is cataloged, crated, and shipped to the United States under Operation Paperclip. The intelligence officers who handle the Friedrichroda paperwork in the spring of 1945 do not fully understand what they are holding. The aerodynamic data is recognized immediately as advanced. The composite material samples are flagged for further analysis. The target documents and the dirty bomb payload specifications go into the same crates and disappear into the same secure storage. The HO-229 vanishes into Smithsonian back rooms for decades, classified and out of public view. The full picture of what it was designed to do was uncomfortable knowledge, and it stayed uncomfortable for a long time. The 2009 Northrop Grumman replica test is the moment that knowledge finally surfaces in a form the public can see. The legacy that changed aviation. American aerospace engineers absorbed the full Horton documentation, the composite analysis, the carbon adhesive radar absorption data, the complete aerodynamic profile. They put it to work on a new strategic requirement as the Cold War begins. The United States needs a strategic bomber that can penetrate Soviet air defenses without warning. The Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit enters service in 1997, the same fundamental geometry as the HO-229. No fuselage, no tail, no vertical fins. One blended wing carrying everything inside it. On contemporary radar, its cross-section reads as roughly the size of a large bird. A single B-2 costs $2 billion. The United States builds 21 of them. The math that makes a $2 billion stealth bomber invisible to radar was first worked out by two brothers in a German garage with a slide rule. Every American stealth program of the last 50 years runs on principles those brothers proved with plywood and wood glue. The HO-229 sits today at the Udvar Hazy Center in Chantilly, Virginia, the Smithsonian's Annex facility, in open storage alongside other recovered aircraft of the Second World War. No placard explains what it was designed to carry. No sign lists the targets pulled from the facility safes. Most visitors walk past it in under 30 seconds. The HO-18 was finished on paper. 6 engines, transatlantic range, radar invisible, New York and Washington, D.C., named in the documents as confirmed targets, not hypotheticals. The launch profile assumes departure from German-held airfields and a single non-stop crossing of the Atlantic with a dirty bomb in the payload bay. The only thing standing between that aircraft and the U.S. East Coast was a few weeks of unfinished factory work inside a slave labor mountain in southwestern Poland. A few weeks. That is the entire margin between the world that exists and a world where Manhattan and the National Mall are sealed contamination zones nobody enters for the rest of the century. If Project Reese had been completed 6 months earlier and HO-229 production had started in 1944, do you think the radar networks protecting England could have held? Drop your answer in the comments, then subscribe and hit the bell. The next video goes inside a different recovered Nazi weapons program that the Allies buried even deeper, and what they found is somehow worse than this.